This week is set to be a busy one on the diplomatic front for South Korea, as both the Indonesian and French presidents are expected to visit Seoul for talks on cooperation in fields such as energy and supply chains. For more on what to expect, we're joined today by Dr. Dong-soo, professor at the Division of International and Area Studies at Pukyong National University. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, good morning.
So the Indonesian president will be here in South Korea for 3 days starting today and will hold a summit with President Lee and Macron. And a lot of attention is on how they might address the issue of exporting the locally developed KF-21 fighter jets. How do you think the talks will play out?
The 3-day visit by the Indonesian president to meet the South Korean President Lee and Macron is widely seen as a decisive moment for the export prospects of KF-21 보람의 fighter jet. It is generally expected that the talks will produce a visible progress, but probably not a fully finalized deal yet. A preliminary or framework agreement about KF-21 purchase between the two countries is likely. Although the KF-21 dominates headlines, the summit agenda is much broader, including defense industry cooperation, AI and high-tech collaboration, energy security, and regional diplomacy, and so on.
Right, and French President Emmanuel Macron is also set to visit Seoul this week, and this is the first time in 11 years that a French leader is traveling to South Korea. What issues might be raised in talks between President Lee and Macron?
The Lee-Macron summit will likely emphasize technology partnership and strategic cooperation rather than a single headline deal. Macron's visit to Seoul is mainly about aligning South Korea and France as middle power partners in global security, energy, and technology. The summit will likely address broader geopolitical issues, including coordination between Europe and Indo-Pacific partners, support for Ukraine, and maintaining the rule-based international order. Also, defense ties may come up as well, although probably less prominent than with other partners. Areas of discussions may include defense industry cooperation, aerospace and satellite security, and regional security issues, such as North Korea's nuclear program. And I also think energy security issues like nuclear power cooperation is also likely to be placed very high on the agenda, in the sense that both countries heavily rely on nuclear energy, and they are both major exporters of nuclear technology.
I see. And France has also invited President Lee and Macron to the G7 Leaders Summit in June. That's going to take place in France. What's the significance of this invitation, and what might South Korea be aiming for if it does decide to attend?
France's invitation for President Lee and Macron to attend the 2026 G7 summit carries both symbolic and strategic significance for South Korea. Even though South Korea is not a member of G7, invitation to partner countries have increasingly become a way for the group to broaden cooperation with influential middle powers. Being invited signals that South Korea is considered as a relevant partner in addressing global issues, not just a regional actor in Northeast Asia. If President Lee attends, Seoul would likely try to influence discussions on significant issues like semiconductor supply chains, economic security and energy transition, and nuclear powers. For Seoul, the G7 summit is also a good chance to coordinate positions with the key partners like the US, Japan, and European countries.
I see. And Dr. Kim, before I let you go, the foreign ministers of G7 nations call for restoring safe and toll-free navigation in the Strait of Hormuz during a meeting in Paris, which South Korea also attended as an observer state. So how are diplomatic efforts contributing to reopening this critical waterway?
At the meeting of G7 in Paris, 14 ministers issued a joint call urging restraint and respect for international maritime law. This type of collective statement serves two purposes. First, signaling unified political pressure on any actors responsible for disrupting shipping. And second, reinforcing the principle of freedom of navigation, which is a cornerstone of international maritime law. Because the G7 economies heavily rely on Gulf energy supplies, a unified diplomatic position increases the leverage behind to reopen the route.
I see. All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.